The dust cloud on the horizon meant trouble. Jake Martinez could see it from the porch of his sprawling ranch house, a brown smear against the clear Texas sky that spoke of vehicles moving fast across the desert. In his 38 years, he had learned to read the signs of his land like other men read newspapers. This dust cloud was different. It carried the weight of urgency and fear. Jake set down his coffee cup and walked to the edge of the porch. The Double M Ranch stretched out before him, 20,000 acres of prime Texas land that his grandfather had started with nothing but determination and a dream. Now it was worth more money than most people saw in 10 lifetimes. The oil wells scattered across the property brought in millions every year, and the cattle operation was one of the most successful in the state. But money couldn't stop bullets, and Jake had a feeling that's what was coming his way. The intercom on his belt crackled to life. "Boss, we got company coming in hot on the East Road." The voice belonged to Carlos, his head of security. Carlos was a former Marine who had served 3 tours in Afghanistan before Jake hired him to run security for the ranch. In the 5 years Carlos had worked for him, Jake had never heard that edge of concern in his voice. "How many vehicles?" Jake asked, already moving toward the gun safe in his study. 2 trucks moving fast. They're not slowing down for the gates." Jake's jaw tightened. The ranch had state-of-the-art security, but he had always known that determined enemies could get through if they wanted to badly enough. The question was what they wanted and how far they were willing to go to get it. "Lock down the house and call the sheriff," Jake ordered. "And Carlos, get ready for a fight." As he opened the gun safe, Jake's mind raced through the possibilities. His wealth had made him enemies over the years. There were business rivals who resented his success, environmental groups that opposed his drilling operations, and criminal organizations that saw him as a target for extortion. But something told him this was different. This felt personal. The sound of engines grew louder. Jake grabbed his rifle and checked the magazine. Through the window, he could see his ranch hands taking cover behind buildings and vehicles. These weren't ordinary cowboys. Most of them were veterans like Carlos, men who had seen combat and knew how to handle themselves in dangerous situations. Jake had learned long ago that in his line of work, it paid to have good people watching your back. The first truck came into view, a black SUV with tinted windows that screamed government or criminal. It was followed closely by a second vehicle, this one a pickup truck that looked like it had seen better days. Both vehicles were moving at dangerous speeds, kicking up clouds of dust and gravel. Jake's radio crackled again. "Boss, they're not stopping. They just crashed through the main gate." Through his binoculars, Jake could see armed figures in the vehicles. This wasn't a social visit or a business meeting gone wrong. This was an attack, plain and simple. But why? The answer came sooner than he expected. The vehicles skidded to a halt in front of the main house, and armed men poured out. They weren't wearing uniforms, but they moved with military precision. These were professionals, not common criminals looking for a quick score. But then Jake saw something that changed everything. A figure stumbled out of the back of the pickup truck, clearly under duress. Even at a distance, Jake could see it was a young woman, maybe 20 years old, with dark hair and a face that spoke of both beauty and terror. She was being dragged forward by one of the armed men, a gun pressed to her head. "Come out, Martinez." The voice carried across the courtyard with the authority of someone used to giving orders. "We know you're in there. Come out and nobody has to get hurt." Jake studied the scene through his scope. There were 8 armed men, all carrying serious firepower. They had positioned themselves strategically, using the vehicles as cover while keeping the girl exposed in the center. It was a professional setup, designed to give them maximum tactical advantage. But there was something about the girl that bothered Jake. She wasn't dressed like someone who belonged with these men. Her clothes were simple but clean, and despite her obvious terror, she carried herself with a dignity that suggested she came from a good family. This wasn't some criminal's girlfriend or willing accomplice. This was a hostage. "What do you want?" Jake called back, not showing himself but making sure his voice carried. "We want to talk business," the leader replied, "and we brought some insurance to make sure you listen." Jake's blood ran cold. He had been in enough dangerous situations to recognize a kidnapping when he saw one. But why bring their hostage to his ranch? What did they think he could do for them? The answer came with the next words from the leader. "We know about your connections, Martinez. We know you can make certain problems go away. We need you to use those connections, and the girl dies if you don't cooperate." Jake cursed under his breath. His success in business had indeed required him to build relationships with powerful people in government and law enforcement. It was how business was done in Texas, where oil money and political influence went hand in hand. But he had never used those connections for anything illegal, and he wasn't about to start now. "Let the girl go," Jake called back. "Whatever you need, we can discuss it like civilized people." "No dice, Martinez. The girl stays with us until we get what we want. Her life depends on your cooperation." Jake watched as the girl stumbled and nearly fell. One of the men jerked her upright roughly, causing her to cry out in pain. The sound went through Jake like a knife. He had always had a protective streak, especially when it came to women and children. Seeing this young woman being terrorized by armed thugs triggered something deep in his nature. "Think about it, Martinez," the leader continued. "We know all about you. We know you made your money in ways that weren't always strictly legal. We know about the politicians in your pocket and the judges who owe you favors. All we're asking is that you use those resources to help us with a little problem." Jake's mind raced. It was true that his business empire had required him to operate in moral gray areas sometimes. Oil and gas development in Texas was a rough business, and success required a willingness to play hardball when necessary. But kidnapping was a line he would never cross, and he wouldn't be blackmailed into helping others cross it either. "What kind of problem?" Jake asked, buying time while he tried to figure out his next move. "There's a federal investigation that needs to go away. Some charges that need to be dropped. We know you can make it happen." Jake felt sick. These men weren't just criminals. They were the kind of criminals who thought they could intimidate their way out of serious federal charges. The kind of people who would murder an innocent girl without hesitation if it served their purposes. "And if I refuse?" Jake asked. "Then we start sending you pieces of this pretty little thing," the leader replied coldly, "starting with her fingers and working our way up." The girl whimpered, and Jake saw her legs buckle with fear. Only the grip of her captor kept her upright. In that moment, Jake made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to let these animals hurt an innocent person, no matter what it cost him. "I need time to think about it," Jake called back. "You have 1 hour," the leader replied. "After that, we start the demonstration." Jake pulled back from the window and activated his radio. "Carlos, I need you to listen carefully. We're dealing with federal fugitives who are holding a hostage. I want you to get word to Sheriff Morrison immediately. Tell him to contact the FBI and request a hostage rescue team." "Copy that, boss. What about the girl?" Jake looked out at the terrified young woman being held at gunpoint. "We're going to get her out of this alive, whatever it takes." As he spoke, Jake was already formulating a plan. These men had made a mistake bringing their operation to his ranch. They were on his territory now, surrounded by his people and far from any escape route. They thought they held all the cards because they had a hostage, but they didn't understand who they were dealing with. Jake Martinez had built his fortune by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than his competition. He had survived business wars, political battles, and economic downturns that had destroyed lesser men. He wasn't about to be intimidated by a group of criminals, no matter how well-armed they were. But first, he needed to know more about the situation. Who was the girl, and how had she become involved with these men? Were there others being held somewhere else? And what was the nature of the federal investigation they were trying to escape? Jake activated his secure phone and dialed a number he hadn't used in years. It was answered on the second ring by a voice he recognized immediately. Deputy Director Harrison's office. "Bill, it's Jake Martinez. I need a favor and I need it fast." William Harrison was the deputy director of the FBI's Criminal Investigation Division, and he owed Jake several favors from their days working together on anti-terrorism operations along the Mexican border. Jake's ranch had served as a staging area for federal operations, and his resources had been invaluable in several successful missions. "Jake, what can I do for you?" "I have armed fugitives on my property holding a hostage. They claim to be running from a federal investigation and want me to use my influence to make their problems go away. I need to know who these people are and what they're running from." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Jesus, Jake, are you safe?" "For now, but they're threatening to kill the hostage if I don't cooperate. I need information fast." "Give me everything you can about these people. Descriptions, vehicle information, anything that might help identify them. Jake provided all the details he could observe from his position. As he spoke, he continued to monitor the situation through his binoculars. The girl was sitting on the ground now, surrounded by the armed men. She looked exhausted and terrified, but she was still alive. "Jake, I'm running this through our database now," Harrison said. "In the meantime, we're dispatching a hostage rescue team to your location. They'll be there within 2 hours." "These people said they'll start hurting the hostage in 1 hour," Jake replied grimly. "Then we need to keep them talking. Don't give them what they want, but don't provoke them either. Just buy us time." Jake understood. It was a delicate balance, keeping the hostage alive while federal agents got into position. But 2 hours felt like an eternity when an innocent person's life was at stake. "Boss," Carlos's voice came through the radio, "I've got eyes on the girl. She's conscious and alert, but she's in bad shape. Looks like she's been roughed up pretty good." Jake's anger flared. These men had not only kidnapped an innocent person, but they had abused her as well. That made this personal in a way that went beyond simple criminal justice. "Any sign of additional hostages?" Jake asked. "Negative. Looks like it's just the girl." That was something, at least. Jake's phone buzzed with an incoming message from Harrison. It contained photos and basic information about the suspects, obtained from facial recognition software and vehicle registration databases. What he read made his blood run cold. These weren't ordinary criminals. They were members of a sophisticated human trafficking organization that operated along the Texas-Mexico border. The federal investigation they were trying to escape involved dozens of victims and millions of dollars in illegal profits. The girl wasn't just an innocent bystander who had been grabbed for convenience. She was one of their victims, someone they had been trafficking who had somehow tried to escape. The thought of what she had already endured made Jake's hands clench into fists. But the information also gave him leverage. These men were facing life sentences if they were caught. That made them desperate, but it also made them predictable. They would do anything to escape, which meant they might make mistakes. Jake's radio crackled again. "Boss, they're getting restless out there. The leader keeps checking his watch and talking to his men. I think they're getting ready to make good on their threat." Jake looked at his own watch. 40 minutes had passed. He was running out of time to stall, and the FBI rescue team was still an hour away. He needed to do something to buy more time, but what? The answer came to him suddenly. These men wanted to use his influence to escape federal charges. What if he offered them something better? What if he offered them a way to escape entirely? It was a dangerous gambit, but it might be the only way to keep the hostage alive long enough for help to arrive. Jake picked up his rifle and headed for the door. "Carlos, I'm going out there to negotiate face to face. Keep your people in position and be ready for anything." "Boss, that's not a good idea. These people are desperate." "Exactly, and desperate people make mistakes. I'm going to give them what they think they want, and hopefully that will give us the opening we need." Jake walked out of the house with his hands visible, but his rifle still within easy reach. The armed men immediately trained their weapons on him, but their leader held up a hand to stop them from shooting. "Smart man, Martinez. I was beginning to think you didn't care about the girl." Up close, Jake could see that the girl was even younger than he had first thought. She couldn't be more than 19, with the kind of innocent face that belonged in a college classroom, not in the hands of human traffickers. Her eyes met his briefly, and he saw a spark of hope there that nearly broke his heart. "Let's talk," Jake said, his voice steady despite the fury building inside him. "But first, I want to know the girl's name. If we're going to do business, I want to know who I'm protecting." The leader smirked. "Her name doesn't matter, she's just merchandise." The casual cruelty of the words made Jake's trigger finger itch, but he forced himself to remain calm. "It matters to me. What's your name, miss?" The girl opened her mouth to speak, but one of the men grabbed her hair and yanked her head back. "Shut up," he snarled. "Maria," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "My name is Maria Santos." Jake nodded, filing the name away. Maria Santos. She was no longer just a hostage to him. She was a person with a name and a life that had been stolen from her, and he was going to make sure she got it back. "All right, Maria," he said softly. "Everything's going to be okay." Then he turned to the leader. "You want my help with your federal problem? I can do better than that. I can get you out of the country entirely." New identities, clean passports, transportation to anywhere in the world you want to go. The leader's eyes narrowed with suspicion. That's a hell of an offer. What's the catch? No catch, but I need some guarantees. The girl goes free unharmed, and I need time to make the arrangements. How much time? Jake pretended to consider. 24 hours, maybe 48. Too long, we need to be gone tonight. Then you're asking for the impossible, Jake replied. Quality documents take time, unless you want to get caught at the first checkpoint with fake papers that won't pass a serious inspection. He could see the leader weighing the options. The promise of escape was tempting, but it required trust, and trust was something criminals found hard to give. 6 hours, the leader finally said. You have 6 hours to produce what you promised. If you're lying to us, the girl dies slowly. Jake nodded. Fair enough, but I'll need to make some calls, and some of the people I need to reach don't like to do business over the phone. I'll need to meet with them in person. Nice try, you're not leaving this ranch. Then bring them here. But I'm warning you, these are serious people who don't like surprises. If they show up and see guns pointed at them, they'll disappear and you'll never find them again. The leader considered this. Jake could almost see him working through the possibilities in his mind. The promise of escape was too good to pass up, but accepting it meant taking risks. Fine, he said finally, but the girl stays with us, and if this is some kind of trick. It's not a trick, Jake lied smoothly. It's business. You have something I want, the girl's safety. I have something you want, a way out of your problems. Let's make a deal. As he spoke, Jake was calculating distances and angles. The girl was about 15 feet away, surrounded by armed men but not directly covered by all of them. If he could create enough confusion, there might be a chance to get her clear of the line of fire. But not yet. The odds were still too heavily stacked against them. He needed the criminals to relax their guard, to believe that they were about to get what they wanted. Only then would they make the mistake that would give him the opening he needed. I'll start making the calls, Jake said. But I need some good faith from you too. The girl looks like she's about to collapse. Get her some water and let her sit in the shade. The leader gestured to one of his men, who grudgingly brought Maria a bottle of water and allowed her to move to a spot near one of the vehicles where she would be partially shielded from the sun. It wasn't much, but it was something, and every small improvement in her situation was a victory worth fighting for. Jake pulled out his phone and began making calls. Most of them were to real contacts, people who could actually provide the services he was promising if he had been serious about helping criminals escape justice. But some of the calls were to his own security team, using coded language to coordinate their response. The game was on. Jake Martinez was playing for the highest stakes possible, an innocent life, and he had no intention of losing. The afternoon sun was beginning to set behind the hills when Jake finished his last phone call. He had been negotiating with the traffickers for 3 hours now, spinning an elaborate web of lies about escape routes and false documents while secretly coordinating with law enforcement. The FBI hostage rescue team was now in position around the ranch, but they couldn't make their move until they were sure Maria would be safe. Maria Santos. Jake kept coming back to that name and the face that went with it. She was sitting in the shade of the pickup truck now, but her eyes never left her captors. Despite everything she had been through, there was still fight in her. Jake recognized that look. It was the same expression he had seen in the mirror during the darkest days of building his business empire. She wasn't broken yet. Time's up, Martinez, the leader called out. Where are these miracle workers you promised us? Jake checked his watch. He had managed to buy almost the full 6 hours, but now he was running out of stalling tactics. They're coming, but these people don't work on anyone's schedule but their own. We need to be patient. Patience is a luxury we don't have, the leader snapped. Every minute we stay here increases the risk of being found. That was exactly what Jake was counting on. The longer they stayed, the more likely they were to make a mistake, and when they did, he would be ready. Jake's earpiece crackled with a barely audible message from Carlos. Boss, we've got movement. FBI snipers are in position on the North Ridge. They have clean shots on 6 of the 8 targets. 6 out of 8 wasn't good enough. The 2 men they couldn't hit were standing too close to Maria. If shooting started before she was clear, she could be caught in the crossfire or killed by her captors before they went down. We need a better position, Jake sub-vocalized into his throat mic. Can we get the girl moved? The leader was getting increasingly agitated. He kept checking his phone and scanning the horizon for signs of trouble. His men were feeding off his nervous energy, and Jake could see the situation was about to boil over. "That's it," the leader said suddenly. "We're done waiting. Either your people show up in the next 10 minutes or we start sending you pieces of the girl." Maria's eyes went wide with terror, but she didn't scream. Instead, she looked directly at Jake and mouthed a single word: "Sister." Jake's blood ran cold. A sister. Maria Santos had a sister, and from the desperate look in her eyes, Jake realized that her sister was probably still in the hands of these monsters. The conversation he had overheard earlier suddenly made sense. Maria hadn't been randomly grabbed as a hostage. She had been recaptured after trying to escape, and she had left someone behind. "Wait," Jake called out. "Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. The girl mentioned a sister. Is she part of this deal too?" The leader's expression darkened. "What do you care?" "Because if there's another hostage somewhere else, it changes the complexity of the extraction. My people need to know what they're dealing with." "There's no sister," the leader lied, but Jake could see the truth in his eyes. "Just the one girl." Maria shook her head frantically, tears streaming down her face. She was trying to tell him something, but Jake couldn't risk having her speak directly. The traffickers would punish her for revealing information. Jake's mind raced. If there was another hostage, the situation was even more complicated than he had thought. The FBI needed to know, but he couldn't reveal that information without putting both sisters in danger. "Look," Jake said carefully, "whatever the full scope of this operation is, I can handle it. But I need complete honesty about what we're dealing with. How many people are we talking about extracting?" The leader's patience finally snapped. "We're done with questions. You've got 5 minutes to produce results or the girl dies." He gestured to one of his men, who grabbed Maria roughly and dragged her toward the center of the courtyard. Another man produced a wicked-looking knife and held it to her throat. "Please," Maria whispered, but she wasn't looking at Jake. She was looking past him toward something only she could see. "Please find Rosa. She's only 16. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. A 16-year-old sister named Rosa, still in the hands of human traffickers. The thought of what that child might be going through made him sick with rage and determination. 5 minutes, the leader repeated. Then we find out how much this girl's life is really worth to you. Jake activated his throat mic. "Carlos, we have a problem. There's another hostage, a 16-year-old sister. We need to find her before we move on these guys." "Boss, we don't have time for a search. If we don't act soon, they're going to kill the girl we can save." It was an impossible choice. Save the hostage in front of him and lose the chance to find her sister, or risk both their lives by trying to extract information about Rosa's whereabouts. Jake made his decision. He had to trust that his team could find Rosa later. Right now, his priority was saving the life that was directly threatened. "I'm walking out there," Jake announced. "When I give the signal, take them down." "Boss, that's suicide." "No, it's the only way to get close enough to pull the girl clear." Jake was already moving, his hands visible but his body positioned to shield Maria when the shooting started. "That's far enough, Martinez," the leader barked as Jake approached. "Unless you've got what we want, you need to back off." "I've got something better," Jake replied. "I've got a counteroffer." "We're done negotiating." "Hear me out. You want to escape federal charges, right? What if I told you I could guarantee it? Not through false documents or running away, but through making the charges disappear entirely." The leader's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but Jake could see he was listening. Desperation made people willing to believe in miracles. "How?" "Because I'm not just some rich rancher," Jake said quietly. "I'm a federal informant, have been for years. The FBI uses my ranch for operations along the border. I provide information and they provide protection." It was a dangerous lie, but it was the only way Jake could think of to explain how he might have the power to make federal charges disappear. And there was just enough truth in it to be believable. Jake did cooperate with federal law enforcement, though not as an official informant. "You're lying," the leader said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Am I? How else do you think I built this empire without ever being seriously investigated? How do you think I stay ahead of all the environmental groups and political enemies? I have protection at the highest levels." Jake could see the leader's mind working. The explanation made sense from his perspective. Corruption and inside deals were the criminal world's explanation for any success they couldn't understand. Even if that's true, the leader said slowly, why would you help us? Because you have something I want. The girl, why do you care about her? Jake looked directly at Maria, making sure she could see the sincerity in his eyes. Because 20 years ago, I was in your business. Different operation, but same general idea. I moved people across borders who didn't want to be moved. Another lie, but a carefully calculated one. Jake had never been involved in human trafficking, but he had been involved in smuggling operations along the Mexican border, moving guns and money for various government agencies during his military contracting days. I got out because I met a girl just like this one, Jake continued. Young, scared, torn away from her family. When I saw what the business really did to people, I couldn't stomach it anymore. I've been looking for a way to balance the scales ever since. Maria was staring at him with wide eyes, and Jake prayed she would understand that he was lying to save her life. The story was designed to make the traffickers believe he had personal reasons for helping them that went beyond simple negotiation. So here's my offer, Jake said. You let the girl go and I use my connections to make your federal problems disappear, all of them, clean slates all around. And if we say no? Jake's expression hardened. Then you deal with the consequences of holding a hostage on federal property owned by a government informant. How do you think that's going to end for you? The bluff was risky, but Jake could see it was working. The leader was looking around nervously, suddenly aware that this isolated ranch might not be as safe as he had thought. Think about it, Jake pressed. You came here because you thought I had influence. I'm telling you that influence goes deeper than you imagined, but it only works if you play by my rules. What rules? First rule, no one gets hurt who doesn't deserve it. The girl goes free unharmed. And the second rule? There is no second rule. You let her go, I make your problems disappear. It's that simple. The leader looked at his men, then back at Jake. How do we know you're not lying? Because if I am, you can always kill me and take your chances with the federal manhunt. But if I'm telling the truth, this is your one chance at a clean escape. Jake could see the man wavering. The offer was too good to refuse, but acceptance required trust. And trust was something criminals found hard to give. I need proof, the leader said finally. Prove to me that you have the connections you claim. Jake had been expecting this. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. After a few rings, it was answered. This is Deputy Director Harrison. Jake had called his FBI contact and hoped the man would play along. Bill, it's Jake. I need you to confirm something for some associates of mine. There was a pause. Harrison was smart enough to realize that Jake was in trouble and needed backup for whatever story he was telling. What do you need, Jake? I need you to confirm that I'm a valuable federal asset and that my word carries weight with your organization. Another pause, longer this time. Jake, are you in danger? Just answer the question, Bill. Yes, Harrison said carefully. Jake Martinez has been a valuable asset to federal law enforcement for many years. His cooperation has been essential to several successful operations. Jake put the phone on speaker so the leader could hear. And if I asked you to review certain federal cases for potential prosecutorial discretion, would you be willing to consider that request? Within legal parameters, yes. Your recommendations carry significant weight. It was beautifully ambiguous, true enough to be believable, without actually promising anything illegal. Jake ended the call and looked at the leader expectantly. Satisfied. The leader was clearly torn. The phone call had been convincing, but letting go of his only leverage was a huge risk. Here's what we're going to do, he said finally. We'll move to a more secure location and you can make your calls from there. The girl stays with us until we see results. Jake shook his head. That's not how this works. The girl goes free first, then I make the calls. That's the deal. No deal, we keep the girl. Then we have a problem, Jake said quietly, because I'm not making any calls while she's still in danger. The standoff stretched out for long minutes. Jake could feel the tension building to a breaking point. Soon, someone was going to make a move that would determine whether Maria lived or died. The leader's phone rang. He answered it cautiously, speaking in rapid Spanish. Jake's knowledge of the language was limited, but he caught enough to understand that something had gone wrong somewhere else. The leader's face darkened as he listened. "What is it?" one of his men asked. "The safe house was raided an hour ago," the leader snapped. "Federal agents arrested everyone there." Jake's heart sank. If there had been a safe house, that's where Rosa might have been held. If it had been raided, the younger sister might already be safe, or she might have been moved somewhere else before the raid. "How many did we lose?" another man asked. "Everyone, 8 men and all the merchandise." Merchandise? The casual way they referred to human beings as merchandise made Jake's hands clench into fists. These people were animals who deserved everything that was coming to them. But the news also changed the tactical situation. The leader and his men were now completely isolated. Their support network was gone, and they had nowhere to run. That made them more dangerous because they had nothing left to lose. "This changes things," the leader said, turning back to Jake. "We need those new identities now, not later, and we need transportation out of the country tonight." "I can arrange that," Jake lied, "but I need the girl released first." "The girl is the only thing keeping us alive. She stays with us." Jake could see that they were back to square one. The leader was too smart to give up his only leverage, and Jake couldn't make his move while Maria was still in immediate danger. But then Maria herself changed the equation. She looked directly at Jake and spoke clearly for the first time since he had come outside. "Please, sir," she said, "if they find Rosa before you do, save my sister. She's all the family I have left." The leader backhanded her across the face, sending her sprawling to the ground. "I told you to shut up." The sight of the young woman being struck triggered something primal in Jake. Without thinking, he took a step forward, his hand moving toward the weapon concealed under his jacket. "Don't," the leader warned, pointing his gun at Jake's chest. "Don't be a hero, Martinez. It won't end well for any of us." But Jake had had enough. This had gone on too long, and these animals had hurt an innocent person one too many times. Hero or not, he wasn't going to stand by and watch anymore. "You made a mistake coming to my ranch," he said quietly. "This is my land, surrounded by my people. You're not getting out of here alive." The leader smiled coldly. "Maybe not, but neither is the girl." Jake could see the man's finger tightening on the trigger. In seconds, Maria would be dead. It was time to act. "Now," Jake shouted, diving toward Maria as gunfire erupted around the courtyard. The next few minutes were chaos. FBI snipers opened fire from the ridgeline while Jake's security team moved in from multiple directions. Jake tackled Maria and rolled with her toward the cover of the nearest vehicle, bullets whistling overhead. But the leader had been ready for betrayal. Even as his men fell around him, he kept his weapon trained on Maria. Jake could see murder in the man's eyes as he lined up his shot. There was only one thing Jake could do. He threw himself between Maria and the gun just as the leader pulled the trigger. The impact knocked Jake backwards, fire spreading through his chest. But Maria was alive. That was what mattered. As consciousness faded, Jake heard Maria crying his name. But his last thought before everything went dark was of a 16-year-old girl named Rosa Santos and the promise he had made to find her. The steady beeping of medical equipment was the first sound Jake heard as consciousness slowly returned. His chest felt like it was on fire, and every breath was an effort. But he was alive. The relief of that realization was quickly replaced by a flood of memories from the ranch. "Maria," he croaked, his throat dry as sandpaper. "She's safe." The voice belonged to Deputy Director Harrison, who was sitting in a chair beside the hospital bed. "You've been unconscious for 18 hours. The bullet missed your heart by less than an inch." Jake tried to sit up but was immediately reminded of his injury by a sharp spike of pain. "Rosa, we have to find Rosa." "Already found her," Harrison said with a slight smile. "She was in the safe house when we raided it. She's been asking about you nonstop since she heard what you did for her sister." The relief was overwhelming. Both sisters were safe. The risk Jake had taken, the gamble with his own life, had been worth it. "How is she, Rosa, I mean?" Harrison's expression grew serious. "Physically, she'll recover. Emotionally, it's going to take time. She's been through hell. They both have." Jake closed his eyes, thinking about what those young women had endured. Human trafficking was one of the most brutal crimes imaginable, destroying lives and families with casual cruelty. He had seen the effects during his government contracting days, but witnessing it firsthand was different. "What about the traffickers?" All dead or in custody. The leader, his name was Eduardo Vasco, died at the scene. His organization is finished. Jake nodded slowly. He felt no satisfaction in Vasco's death, only relief that the man could never hurt anyone else. I want to see them, Maria and Rosa. The doctors say you shouldn't have visitors yet. You lost a lot of blood and... I want to see them, Jake repeated, his voice stronger despite the pain. Harrison studied him for a moment, then nodded. I'll see what I can do, but first there are some things we need to discuss. Your actions yesterday saved 2 lives, but they also exposed you to some serious legal questions. Jake's mind was still foggy from the medication, but he understood the implication. His claims to be a federal informant, his promises to make criminal charges disappear, even as lies told to save a hostage's life, they could still cause problems. Am I under investigation? Officially? No. Unofficially. There are people who want to understand exactly how Jake Martinez was able to convince a group of federal fugitives that he could make their problems disappear. Some of those people think you might actually have that kind of influence. Jake managed a weak laugh that turned into a cough. If I had that kind of influence, would I be lying in a hospital bed with a bullet wound? That's exactly what I told them. But Jake, this has brought unwanted attention to your business operations. There are going to be questions about your government contracts, your political connections, your financial arrangements. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny? Jake thought about it. His business empire was built on legitimate foundations, but like any major operation in Texas, it involved relationships and arrangements that wouldn't look good under a microscope. The oil and gas industry was particularly vulnerable to environmental and regulatory challenges. I'll deal with it, he said finally. I'd rather face an audit than live with the knowledge that I let those girls die. Harrison smiled. I thought you'd say that, and for what it's worth, you've got friends in the Bureau who will make sure any investigation is fair and thorough, not a witch hunt. A knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A nurse entered, followed by a young woman Jake recognized immediately despite her cleaned-up appearance. Maria Santos looked completely different than she had during the hostage situation. Gone were the torn clothes and terrified expression. She wore a simple blue dress and had her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. But her eyes were the same deep brown and filled with an intelligence that had survived everything the traffickers had done to her. Mr. Martinez, she said softly, I wanted to thank you. You don't need to thank me, Jake replied. How are you doing? Better, the doctors say I'm going to be fine. And Rosa, her voice caught slightly. Rosa is going to be okay too. She's sleeping right now, but she wanted me to tell you that she owes you her life. You don't owe me anything, either of you. Maria moved closer to the bed, and Jake could see tears forming in her eyes. You took a bullet for me, a stranger. Why would you do that? It was a question Jake had been asking himself since regaining consciousness. Why had he risked his life for someone he didn't know? Why had he been willing to face down armed criminals to protect 2 young women he had never met? Because it was the right thing to do, he said simply, and because everyone deserves a chance to live their life free from fear. Maria nodded, wiping away her tears. The FBI agents told us about your ranch, about how much money you have. They said you could have just stayed in your house and waited for help to arrive. Maybe, but that wasn't really an option. Why not? Jake thought about how to explain it. A long time ago, I learned that having money and power doesn't mean anything unless you use them to help people who can't help themselves. You and your sister needed help. I was in a position to provide it. Simple as that. Maria smiled for the first time since he had met her. My grandmother used to say that angels don't always have wings. Sometimes they just have good hearts. The comparison made Jake uncomfortable. He didn't see himself as any kind of angel, just a man who had been in the right place at the right time to make a difference. Tell me about Rosa, he said, changing the subject. How is she really? Maria's smile faded slightly. She's strong, stronger than me in some ways, but she's also younger, and what they did to her. She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Jake didn't need her to. He had read the FBI reports on human trafficking operations. He knew what victims endured, especially children. The physical injuries would heal, but the psychological trauma would take years to overcome. Are you going to be able to go home? Do you have family? Our parents died in a car accident 3 years ago, Maria explained. That's how we ended up in this situation. We were trying to cross the border to live with our aunt in Houston, the people who promised to help us. They weren't what they claimed to be. Jake felt a familiar anger building in his chest. The traffickers had targeted orphans because they were vulnerable, with no family to report them missing or search for them. It was predatory behavior at its worst. What will you do now? The FBI Victim Services Coordinator is helping us apply for special visas. She says because we helped with the investigation and because of what happened to us, we'll probably be able to stay in the country legally. That was something, at least. But legal status was only the beginning of what these young women would need to rebuild their lives. Maria, I want you to know that if you need anything medical care, education, housing, whatever, you can call me. Both of you. She looked surprised. Mr. Martinez, you've already done so much. What I did was the bare minimum. Any decent person would have done the same thing. What I'm offering now is a choice. You can accept help rebuilding your lives or you can face the future on your own. Either way is fine with me. Maria was quiet for a long moment, considering his words. Why would you want to help us? Because I can, and because everyone deserves a second chance at life. Harrison cleared his throat. Jake, there's something else you should know. The media has gotten hold of this story. You're being called a hero, and there's a lot of interest in your role in the rescue. Jake groaned. Media attention was the last thing he wanted. It would bring more scrutiny to his business operations and make it harder for him to maintain the privacy he valued. How bad is it? 3 major networks have requested interviews. The local papers are running front-page stories, and there are at least a dozen reporters camped out in the hospital parking lot right now. Great, just great. Maria looked confused by Jake's obvious displeasure. Isn't it good that people know what you did? Not really. I prefer to keep my private life private, and the kind of attention this brings, it's not always friendly. Harrison nodded in agreement. There are already questions being raised about Jake's wealth, his business practices, his political connections. Some people are suggesting that he might have been involved with the traffickers somehow. The accusation was absurd, but Jake knew how the media worked. A rich man with government contracts and political connections makes for an easy target, especially when the full story is too complex for a 30-second sound bite. What do you recommend? Jake asked. Give one interview to a credible journalist. Tell your story honestly and completely. Let people see who you really are instead of letting them speculate about who you might be. Jake considered it. He hated the idea of opening his life to public scrutiny, but Harrison was probably right. Silence would only fuel more speculation and conspiracy theories. And what about Maria and Rosa? Are they going to be dragged into this circus too? The FBI is working to protect their identities, Harrison assured him. They've been through enough without having to deal with media attention. Maria touched Jake's hand gently. Mr. Martinez, if talking to reporters would help people understand what kind of man you are, Rosa and I would be willing to speak with them too. Absolutely not, Jake said immediately. You've already sacrificed enough. You don't owe the public an explanation for what happened to you. But if it would help you... It wouldn't, and even if it would, I wouldn't ask you to relive your trauma for the benefit of strangers. Harrison stood up. I should let you rest. The doctors want to keep you for observation for another day or two. After that, you'll need to take it easy for several weeks while your chest heals. What about my ranch, my business operations? Carlos and your management team are handling everything. The ranch is still a crime scene, but the FBI should be finished processing it within a few days. After Harrison left, Jake found himself alone with Maria. She seemed reluctant to leave, as if she had more to say but wasn't sure how to say it. What is it? Jake asked. I keep thinking about what you said to those men, about being in their business 20 years ago. Was that true? Jake had hoped she wouldn't ask about that. The lies he had told to the traffickers had been necessary to save her life, but he didn't want her to believe them. No, it wasn't true. I've never been involved in human trafficking or anything like it. I said what I thought they needed to hear to keep you alive. Maria looked relieved. I didn't think you could have been that kind of person, but I needed to know for sure. I understand. What else are you wondering about? Everything, I guess. Your life, your ranch, how you knew what to do in that situation. You seemed so calm, so in control. like you'd been in dangerous situations before. Jake considered how much to tell her. The truth was that he had been in dangerous situations before, during his military contracting days and his early years in the oil business. But those experiences seemed like a different lifetime now. I learned a long time ago that panic doesn't solve problems, he said finally. When bad things happen, you can either let fear control you or you can focus on what needs to be done. I chose to focus on getting you out of there alive. And you almost died doing it. But I didn't die, and neither did you or Rosa, that's what matters. Maria was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What's going to happen to us now? I mean really happen?" It was a good question. Victim services could provide temporary assistance, but rebuilding lives after trauma was a long-term process that required sustained support. That depends on what you want to happen, Jake replied. What did you and Rosa dream about before all this started? What kind of life were you trying to build? Rosa wanted to be a teacher. She's brilliant with children, and she was always helping younger kids in our village with their schoolwork. I was studying to be a nurse before our parents died. Those are both good dreams worth fighting for, and they're both achievable with the right support. But the money, the education, we have nothing. You have your lives, your intelligence, and your determination. Everything else can be provided. There are scholarship programs for trafficking victims, support services for trauma recovery, job training programs. If you're serious about pursuing those dreams, we can make them happen. Jake realized what he had said. He was already thinking of Maria and Rosa's futures as his responsibility, even though he had known them for less than 2 days. I meant that resources are available. Organizations that help trafficking victims, foundations that provide scholarships, government programs designed to help people rebuild their lives. But even as he said it, Jake knew he was going to be personally involved in their recovery. He couldn't save them from their past, but he could help them build their future. Mr. Martinez, Maria said softly, I know we've only just met, but I feel like I've known you my whole life. Does that sound crazy? No, it doesn't sound crazy. Shared danger creates bonds that are hard to explain to people who haven't experienced them. Is that what this is? Just trauma bonding? Jake thought about it. The connection he felt to Maria and Rosa went beyond just having shared a dangerous experience. There was something about their strength, their resilience in the face of unimaginable cruelty that reminded him of his own struggles to overcome adversity. I don't know, he said honestly, but whatever it is, it's real, and it's not going away just because the immediate danger is over. A soft knock on the door interrupted their conversation. A younger woman peered in hesitantly, and Jake immediately recognized Rosa Santos. She looked even younger than her 16 years, with the same dark eyes as her sister, but a face that still held traces of childhood innocence despite everything she had endured. Rosa, Maria said warmly, come meet Mr. Martinez. Rosa approached the bed shyly, staying close to her sister. When she spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Thank you for saving us, she said. The FBI lady told me what you did. Looking at this young girl, Jake felt a protective instinct that went beyond anything he had ever experienced. She should be in high school, worried about homework and boys and prom dresses. Instead, she was a survivor of horrors that no child should ever face. How are you feeling, Rosa? He asked gently. Better, the doctors are very nice, and the counselor says the scary feelings will get easier with time. Jake was impressed by her composure. Many adults would have been completely broken by what she had survived. The fact that she could even speak coherently was a testament to her inner strength. I hear you want to be a teacher, Jake said. Rosa's face lit up for the first time. Yes, I love working with children. They're so curious about everything, and they learn so fast when someone takes time to explain things properly. That's a wonderful goal. Teaching is one of the most important jobs in the world. Do you really think I could do it, even after what happened to me? The question broke Jake's heart. This brilliant, brave young woman was wondering if her traumatic experiences had disqualified her from pursuing her dreams. Rosa, what happened to you wasn't your fault. It doesn't define who you are or what you can become. If anything, your experiences will make you a better teacher because you'll understand how to help children who are facing their own difficulties. Tears formed in Rosa's eyes, but they seemed to be tears of relief rather than sadness. The counselor said something similar, but I wasn't sure if she was just being nice. She wasn't just being nice. She was telling you the truth. You're going to be a great teacher someday. Maria put her arm around her sister. See, I told you Mr. Martinez would understand. Jake watched the interaction between the sisters and felt a complex mix of emotions. They had been through hell together, but their bond had not only survived, but seemed to have grown stronger. They protected and supported each other in ways that spoke to the best of human nature. Mr. Martinez, Rosa said hesitantly, Maria told me you offered to help us. Is that really true? It's true. If you want help pursuing your education, rebuilding your lives, dealing with medical expenses or legal issues, whatever you need. But why? You don't even know us. It was the same question Maria had asked, and Jake still didn't have a complete answer. But looking at these two young women, he realized that the why didn't matter as much as the how. Because I can help, he said simply, and because everyone deserves a chance to build the life they want. Rosa looked at Maria, then back at Jake. What would we have to do in return? Nothing. This isn't a business transaction or a loan. It's just help from someone who has been blessed with resources to share. That doesn't seem fair, Rosa said. You're giving us so much and we have nothing to give you. Jake smiled. Rosa, you and your sister have already given me more than you know. You've reminded me why I work so hard to build my business, why I try to use my influence responsibly. It's not about accumulating wealth for its own sake. It's about being in a position to help when help is needed. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Jake's doctor, a serious-looking man in his 50s, who frowned disapprovingly at the number of visitors in the room. Mr. Martinez needs rest, he announced. You can visit again tomorrow, but right now he needs to sleep. Maria and Rosa said their goodbyes and headed for the door, but Maria turned back before leaving. Mr. Martinez, I know you don't want to be called a hero, but that's what you are, and not just because of what you did for us, because of who you choose to be every day. After they left, Jake lay in the hospital bed thinking about the events of the past few days. A simple morning on his ranch had turned into a life-or-death struggle that had changed everything. He had saved 2 lives, nearly lost his own, and somehow found a new purpose in the process. His phone buzzed with a text message from Carlos. Boss, the ranch is secure and operations are returning to normal, but there are still reporters everywhere. What do you want me to tell them? Jake thought about it for a moment, then typed back. Tell them that Jake Martinez did what any decent person would do when faced with innocent people in danger. Nothing more, nothing less. But even as he sent the message, Jake knew it wasn't entirely true. What he had done went beyond ordinary decency. It had been a choice to risk everything for strangers, a decision that most people would never be forced to make. The question now was what came next. Maria and Rosa would need years of support to fully recover from their trauma and build new lives. His business empire would face increased scrutiny because of the media attention, and he would have to figure out how to balance his desire for privacy with his new role as a public figure. But for the first time in years, Jake Martinez felt like his wealth and influence had a clear purpose. He wasn't just building an empire anymore. He was building a foundation for other people's dreams. And that made everything worth it.